If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain why. First, it's free. Second, there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Third, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. Fourth, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And lastly, it's everything you need to make a podcast, all in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hello everyone, welcome to the Robots Are Coming Special Topics Edition, a brand new series with short videos on the implications of technology on society. Today is our very first episode on facial recognition. This is Ken.
This is Michael.
Today we'll be having a conversation on facial recognition technology, its impacts on society, its perks, and its limitations.
So hey Ken, let me ask you something. How much would you pay for an all-access VIP sort of service that enables you to unlock your devices, your doors, and building entrances instantly using facial recognition? So like you never have to type a password again, which you may find annoying like me, or reach for your door key or your ID card as you enter your home or school buildings. You can just show your face to the camera. How much would you pay for that?
I wouldn't pay any sizable amount for that, but if it's free, then I'm pretty down. It will make my life easier.
Okay, so say a company offers you this all-access service for free. How much of your privacy are you willing to give up for the opportunity to enjoy these perks?
Well, that's an interesting dilemma. Could you be a little bit more specific on what you mean by privacy?
So say you're walking down the street. Privacy could mean what are the set of people on the street who can A, recognize your face, and B, tie that to some set of personal details about you that they know. Is that the same set of people you know personally? Would you be okay for there to be a set of individuals other than your friends, family, acquaintances who don't know you personally, but can recognize your face and use the image of your face to unearth a personal profile about you?
I mean, other than my friends, family, acquaintances, I wouldn't want my face in the hands of, a government official, company, or person that I don't give permission to.
So on top of that, would you be okay then if the facial recognition is used for any other purpose than helping you unlock your devices or your doors? Say if there's a crime scene that you came across and the CCTV camera saw you in the surrounding, would you be chill with police officers storming your house, drilling you on what you observed at the crime scene?
I mean, I personally use facial recognition for opening and unlocking things like my iPad, but unless I give permission, I wouldn't consider giving my facial recognition information, because I think that would be an invasion of my privacy.
So on this note, I recently remembered a related quote about this. Do you agree with the statement that free services aren't always free?
Yes.
Could you elaborate on that?
I mean, some services like Facebook or Google are free services, but it's at the expense of our data. Oftentimes, our personal data is routinely bought and sold to hundreds of companies. In a way, it's a form of digital slavery where we no longer own our data. It goes to the hands of big companies like Google and Facebook.
Yeah, it's like slavery, but on our online self, in two ways. One, who it belongs to and how it's used for is no longer our jurisdiction once we produce it. And two, it's mostly used for the purpose of extracting, like you said, the value for companies like Facebook or Google, and it can be bought and sold by data brokers and advertising companies without any limit. So in many ways, it does resemble slavery. So I think all this is to add to the interpretation of this statement that free services aren't always free. And we'll certainly see more examples of that in this episode. And hopefully at the end, we can reconcile, where do we draw the line between this added convenience in our lives and what we have to give up.
With that, we hope you enjoyed this episode.
Facial recognition is created and trained in a similar way to how image recognition works using neural networks, which you can think of as highly effective pattern matchers that maps images to classes, like an image of a cat or dog, to the labels 0 for cat and 1 for dog. In addition, it also extracts specific features from the face. Just like your fingerprints, there is a unique layout of a set of facial landmarks corresponding to regions on the face, like the points above the left eye, the right eye, the nose bridge, etc. This allows a model to discriminate between individuals. Facial recognition has been deployed to improve the convenience of our day-to-day lives, from identifying your friends on pictures shared on social media, unlocking your phone or your door, validating identity at ATM machines, and enforcing building security. However, every coin has two sides, and it can be argued the other side is much darker than meets the eye. What is the price we pay for a little extra convenience in our lives? Facial recognition enables a third eye from authorities or companies into our lives, allowing 1, the targeting of specific individuals to their interest, and 2, the ability to surveil our lives in disturbing details. And we see how these two applications correspond to the two most powerful countries in the world. In the US, facial recognition is being used in law enforcement to compile a database of suspect mugshots. That database is queried through images taken from social media, CCTV cameras, traffic cameras, or photos taken from officers on the ground, who use mobile facial recognition to capture suspects in real time. An example is the tactical identification system in San Diego that gives officers across dozens of agencies the right to stop anyone on the street, take a picture, and run it across the county's mugshot database. As of most recently, over 40 states use facial recognition with the DMV databases, routinely as part of law enforcement. At the federal level, the FBI uses next-generation identification, which contains 30 million face records, which state and local agencies have lights-out access to. Two disturbing ways systematic racism are propagated through these practices start from the incentives behind the creators of such systems. Government at both the local and federal level seek out corporate vendors to help deploy such systems, whose main way to benchmark how these models are doing is the accuracy against the existing database. But the existing database doesn't necessarily form an unbiased sample of the population. This is because mugshot photos that are taken are never removed from the database, even those taken from innocent pedestrians stopped by the officer. Multiplying this effect by the collective bias of police officers around the country, and you get a facial recognition model that's much better at identifying suspects of color, which is then used by law enforcement, who use this to justify capturing more images of people of color, creating a vicious cycle of targeted law enforcement on people of color. This is the systematic process behind statistics we hear, like how being black makes you 8 times more likely to be stopped and 11 times more likely to be frisked than white residents. And facial recognition plays a big role behind all this. For the real horrors behind the curtains though, we have to turn to China and see facial recognition used to its full potential. There, the state has partnered with companies to build minority recognition tools to be deployed in surveillance camera systems in cities throughout China that specifically profile the presence of Uyghur Muslims. In Xinjiang, where millions of Uyghurs are in concentration camps and the entire population is subject to social control, demand for such tools have led to skyrocketing valuations of startups like CloudWalk and SenseTime in 2018, as China's Ministry of Public Security, its top police agency, set aside billions of dollars under two government plans, conveniently named Skynet and Sharp Eyes, to computerize surveillance, policing, and intelligence collection. CloudWalk describes one application of its service as, if originally one Uyghur lives in a neighborhood, and within 20 days, 6 Uyghurs appear, it said on its website, then it immediately sends alarms to local law enforcement. Since the deployment of facial recognition, ethnic profiling has become so normative that people have likened it to the short-range wireless technology Bluetooth. Thus, the China Ministry of Public Security began to see its endless potential, not just for targeting minority groups, but for general social control of the population nationwide, which brings us to China's social credit system, a nationwide system of rewards and punishments used to incentivize normative behavior. The de facto system is Alibaba's Sesame Credit program, which calculates the social credit scores of 500 million plus citizens as of 2019, built on top of their payment system Alipay. Top scores, as identified in public by facial recognition, are given first-class treatment wherever they go. That is handled by commercial partners, who provide perks like car renting without a deposit, better foreign exchange rates, special waiting rooms at train stations. The score of this pilot system is calculated across, quote, 1,000 variables across 5 datasets. And the maintenance of those datasets rely on facial recognition for purposes like detecting what items you have been purchasing at the store through store cameras. The punishments for the lowest scores are set so the discredited can't take a single step, quoting the parent of Sesame Credit, Ant Financial. And these punishments are executed by the state. This includes, at its worst, inability to get a loan, mortgage, train ticket, flight, or hotel booking. The government also has lights-out access to user data from companies and uses it to create a blacklist of individuals who, thanks again to facial recognition, could see their image projected on massive electronic billboards at certain intersections in Beijing. There have also been more perverse individual applications of facial recognition in both the private sector and the government. Facial recognition is used by apps like Meitu to develop filters for the face, including a feature that can augment a user's beauty. Backed by both industry and academic literature, facial recognition experts are implicitly creating a beauty standard for faces, like this site called Face++ that provides an API to query the beauty scores of uploaded user images, or this paper called Automatic Classification of Chinese Female Facial Beauty using Support Vector Machine from the South China University of Technology. On the state side, government-funded brain surveillance project NeuralCap is using facial recognition alongside monitoring of brain waves to deploy emotional surveillance technology to using state-owned enterprises to monitor mood shifts for better task allocation and planning in the military and in factories. It has increased one company's profits by $315 million. These examples taken from both the US and China is a small peek at the dark side of the moon for facial recognition enthusiasts. What is the price we pay for a little extra convenience in our lives? It is a question tech enthusiasts like myself should grapple with harder.
Even though there have been several proposals from Congress, there is currently no federal law that regulates facial recognition. The technology is facing growing skepticism from national politicians. And at the same time, local governments have charged ahead with their own regulations and proposals for using or prohibiting the facial recognition technology. In San Francisco and Oakland, for example, they've all banned the use of facial recognition technology by city agencies. On the other end, you have California, in which they take a more regulatory approach, in which there have been state laws to regulate the use of facial technology in police body cameras. There's certainly a lot of work to do to get facial recognition to get recognized and to get regulated on a national level. and it'll only be time until we start moving towards laws that will mimic how it is in San Francisco and Oakland, in which they've outright banned the use of facial recognition technology. So now the question goes towards, to what extent should we regulate facial recognition technology? And there are numerous ways to do this, and there's different extents that we can do this. So the first way is to outright ban it, and it's been banned in places like Oakland, California, and San Francisco, California, where they've unanimously voted to ban facial recognition technology. And you also have another camp of regulating it. And like within the regulating spectrum, there's numerous ways that you could regulate it. And the third is not do anything to facial recognition at all. So, Michael, in your opinion, what do you think should be done, and what approach should we take?
Personally, I don't like to settle on the extremes of either banning it nationwide or letting it run amok like the way it's set off to go at this current rate. I think to regulate it opens up the field for a lot of potential innovative solutions to address it. So the question is, how do we regulate it? Does it start from the government, or does it start from corporations? On the government side, I think you can either go top down from like the federal to the state to the local, or you can see where this current trend of starting from like the local, like you said, multiple cities in California have already outright banned it. Potentially, we could see this being done independently across the country, and then having it go up to the state and eventually to the federal level. So Ken, do you think we should go from the top down on this, or like from the bottom up? Who should take the initiative? And do you think like at this current rate, with what some of these pioneer cities have done, is that a long-term solution to getting this, to the Congress, potentially having it set as a nationwide standard?
I think we should start looking for long-term solutions in the federal level. Although it's been, voted to be banned in places like San Francisco, I think there should be more federal oversight over facial recognition technology. And this federal oversight should, I think, have more regulation and start looking towards regulation. I think on one hand, I understand why San Francisco voted to ban facial recognition, and it's because they wanted to protect people's privacy and liberty. And I think in my opinion, that is really important to our democracy, in which people have a right in what our data and where our data goes, and how companies or government officials should do with it.
Yeah, I do agree. Like, if it's gonna be done, it should start from the federal level. But we have seen in ways that federal government's priorities have been warped in recent decades. They got rid of the Office of Technology Assessment in 1995, and even with something so crucial to our country like law enforcement, there's no federal standard to track the profiles of police officers and institute an effective way to solve the very issues that facial recognition is concerned with, like discrimination, targeting of minorities, and etc. And we're seeing like this George Floyd incident just being the ugliest representation of that, and many people have very little faith in the federal government. But on the other hand, like you said, if we do start from the bottom up, there's the potential danger of running into what the police departments have turned into, which is you're seeing these police departments in cities across the country, especially in poorer parts of the country, having a really disproportionate power in the local county or in the local town, where they could like influence the mayor and propagate some of these systemic racism and mass incarceration issues that we're currently trying to solve. So in ways like we're worried that facial recognition might just accelerate those very problems as opposed to being being the first of its kind to work in this way. So it's an interesting, question how this will work if we have the government spearhead this effort. But on the other hand, recently we've seen companies really exercise their judgment with companies like IBM, Amazon, Microsoft banning the research of facial recognition.
Yeah, and I think that is especially important at this time because of the Black Lives Matter movement, and that this movement really pushed for a lot of these tech companies to take out a lot of their surveillance technologies out of these police departments, because a lot of times you're right, Michael, in that these facial recognition technologies are alarmingly inaccurate in identifying facial minorities, women, and transgender people, for example. And I think there is this sort of algorithmic bias for a lot of this facial recognition technology, which is a really bad way to have this form of technology.
Yeah, so if we were to let companies try to solve some of these problems, the question is, how do we give those companies the incentives for them to do enough research in algorithmic bias, in discrimination? Because currently, there's in a big tech company, there's maybe hundreds of AI researchers, machine learning engineers, but like maybe none like people actually concerned with the ethics behind it, or like maybe only a very small team of algorithmic bias researchers who are looking at how these systems work in practice, and they might not have their voices heard towards management. So how do we create a sort of alliance perhaps of companies and industry experts to create this sort of governance to solve these issues?
I think a combination of having people within industry and regular, everyday citizens voicing their opinion on what and where they want their facial recognition data to go to. And I think if we sat down to all these stakeholders and had a conversation about this, then I think that would be one of the best ways to go forward, in my opinion.
So are you envisioning these stakeholders to be limited to the same company, or you might come from many different companies and backgrounds as well?
I think it's especially important to have a diverse field of stakeholders, from people from different companies, and not only companies, but just everyday voters and citizens, because I think that's really important for people to have a voice into where their data should go.
Yeah, and I like how this is tying back to our initial dialogue exchange about how much of our privacy are we giving up. If we look at the stakeholders behind these companies right now, they don't really include its users or its citizens, voters. Their data is being sold off, and they're not seeing any of its value coming back. They're not having their voices heard, especially in regards to some of these systematic discriminatory practices that could result from these facial recognition technologies. So it's very important that first and foremost, we have that these voters become a stakeholder in these companies, so they are actually incentivized to put more effort and research into these problems that right now are just being overlooked.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. In which we should, give an opportunity to regular citizens to make their voices be heard. And once we start doing that, I think we will be able to democratize our data, make facial recognition something that is regulated and or banned.
Yeah, and I think on this topic, we'll potentially invite guests from the Stanford, Berkeley law schools and hear what they have to think on this topic of governing facial recognition and how do we get average citizens to become stakeholders in the development of these technologies and other miscellaneous topics related to this.
Yeah, and it's important for our viewers to tune in because you could be a potential stakeholder, advising your government on how they should regulate these type of technologies. So once we invite these guests on, we hope you'll listen to our podcast.
That sounds good. And with that, I think we'll wrap up this first episode. We hope you enjoyed it. It was informative and enlightening, and look forward to our future interviews and special episodes.